What if one of the most innocent-sounding nursery rhymes in the English language wasn't innocent at all? What if Jack and Jill Went Up the Hill was never about children, but about loss, punishment, betrayal, or even death? Welcome to the Silent Lodge, where forgotten stories and quiet horrors come back to life. If ancient rhymes hiding dark truths intrigue you, go ahead and subscribe. We explore the eerie shadows behind the familiar, and today, we're unraveling one of the oldest riddles in plain sight. Everyone knows the rhyme. Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. But behind these rhythmic lines lies a tangled history, one that has morphed through centuries and may conceal secrets far darker than a child's fall. At first glance, it's a simple children's tale. But pause and ask, why were Jack and Jill fetching water on a hill when wells, historically, are found in valleys? The rhyme defies practicality, hinting it's not meant to be literal. It's symbolic, possibly even allegorical. To understand the deeper meaning, we must trace its origin. The earliest printed version dates back to 1765, published in Mother Goose's Melody. However, oral versions may have circulated for generations earlier. Rhymes were often mnemonic devices, not for fun, but to remember events too dangerous to speak aloud. Many folklorists believe the rhyme alludes to real people or political figures. One compelling theory connects Jack and Jill to King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette of France. Jack, the king, loses his crown, literally beheaded during the French Revolution. Jill, the queen, follows soon after. In this interpretation, broke his crown is no mere bump on the head. It's a decapitation. Tumbling after refers to the queen's execution by guillotine. If this theory holds, the rhyme isn't a cute poem. It's a veiled recounting of royal bloodshed. But there's more. Another version of the rhyme from the 1700s ends differently. And Jill came in, and she did grin, to see his paper plaster. Her mother whipped her, across the knee, for laughing at disaster. This variation adds cruelty, punishment, and domestic violence, elements now scrubbed from modern versions. Some historians propose that Jack and Jill were not siblings or lovers, but allegorical stand-ins for the waning moon, Jack, and waxing moon, Jill. The crown, broken, may represent the loss of light, tying the rhyme to pagan lunar cycles and fertility rites. Fertility symbolism appears elsewhere too. In Old English, Jill was a generic name for a girl, and Jack for a boy, often used in songs about romantic encounters, sometimes sexual in nature. The hill, the water, the fall, all metaphors for things far more adult than they seem. Could this rhyme, repeated by millions of children, actually be a remnant of ancient fertility rituals, later sanitized into a nursery rhyme? Or was it always political, a subtle way to pass on tales of rebellion and execution? Whatever its true origin, Jack and Jill has endured not because it's joyful, but because it masks something deep, something haunting. The hill, the fall, the pain, these aren't the stuff of fairy tales, they're clues. Centuries before modern interpretations, nursery rhymes were rarely composed to entertain children. They were tools, encoded messages passed between generations during times when open speech could be fatal. Jack and Jill is no exception. Its verses may have hidden more than just royal executions. They may have carried resistance. One chilling theory suggests the rhyme was crafted during a period of heavy taxation under King Charles I of England. In an attempt to control the economy, he implemented a tax on liquid measures, like pails of water. Jack and Jill were common folk punished under oppressive policy. Their fall? A metaphor for a crumbling public under financial weight. In this light, went up the hill to fetch a pail of water takes on dark irony. It implies effort, a climb, a burden, for something that should have been freely accessible. The fall, then, is a punishment for resisting unjust control. Jack falls first. Jill follows. In this version, no one escapes the consequences. Other researchers trace the rhyme's origins to Scandinavian myths, where hills were seen as places of supernatural contact. In Norse traditions, ascending a hill wasn't about water. It was about confronting gods or spirits, a spiritual journey, and often, such encounters were dangerous. Consider the hill itself. It's elevated, isolated, a liminal space between earth and sky. In ancient symbolism, hills were places of rituals, sacrifices, and transitions. Jack and Jill might not be fetching anything literal at all. Instead, they could be figures in a forgotten rite of passage, one that ends in tragedy. And what of the water? In nearly every ancient culture, water symbolizes life, rebirth, or purification. Yet here, it's unattainable. Jack never gets the water, he falls. The meaning becomes clear. Reaching for purity or freedom brings ruin. That's not a nursery rhyme. That's a warning. Adding to the mystery, older versions of the rhyme vary dramatically. In some, Jack suffers head trauma. In others, Jill dies from childbirth shortly after. These inconsistencies hint that the story was constantly reshaped, altered by each culture to reflect their fears, their lessons, and their grief. During the 18th century, it wasn't uncommon for rhymes to be altered to suit moral instruction. Some versions included extra stanzas about obedience, behavior, or divine punishment. These weren't whimsical. They were cautionary tales disguised as song. Even the phrase "broke his crown" deserves deeper scrutiny. Today, we assume it means hit his head. But in early English, crown also meant sovereignty, masculinity, or pride. Jack's fall may have been psychological or social, not physical. He lost status. He lost identity. Jill's fall remains even more ambiguous. She's not injured, she simply came tumbling after. This passive phrasing could suggest lack of agency, mirroring the historical roles of women who often suffered in silence after a man's downfall, be it in family, royalty, or society. Curiously, the rhyme doesn't end with recovery or hope. There's no resolution, no pail of water, no healing. It simply stops, mid-pain. For a nursery rhyme, that's incredibly bleak, and perhaps intentional, a cultural echo of something lost or deliberately hidden. Behind the cheerful rhythm, Jack and Jill carries the DNA of folk trauma, collective memories wrapped in rhyme. Over time, these meanings may have faded, but the rhyme itself survived. And that survival suggests its message, however obscured, was too important to forget. As the rhyme spread across Europe and the Americas, it continued to evolve, and in doing so, it picked up regional folklore, local fears, and new secrets, all buried beneath its familiar tune. But the well wasn't dry. In the quiet corners of the rhyme's history, darker forces still stir, and the next layer reveals what may be ritualistic origins, shrouded in ancient seasonal rites and blood-soaked symbolism. Long before nursery rhymes existed in printed form, ancient communities gathered to mark the changing of seasons through ritual and sacrifice. Hills, in particular, played a central role in these ceremonies, elevated places thought to bring humans closer to divine realms. And what was often sacrificed? Water, livestock, sometimes people. The symbolism of going up the hill to fetch a pail of water may have originated from seasonal water-gathering rites carried out on sacred high ground. In agrarian societies, access to clean water signified life itself. Seasonal droughts were feared, and rituals were held to summon rain or thank the gods for its return. Some researchers suggest that Jack and Jill were not people at all, but archetypes of seasonal forces, Jack representing the dying summer, Jill the coming harvest. Their fall was the cyclical death required to nourish the land, a sacrifice disguised as a stumble. In pre-Christian Britain, harvest festivals like Lughnasadh involved symbolic deaths of gods or leaders to ensure the fertility of the land. A chosen figure, often male, would undergo ritual humiliation or even execution, followed by a symbolic female partner. These myths mirrored the land's decay and rebirth. The tale of Jack breaking his crown and Jill tumbling after mirrors this very theme. His fall initiates the sacrifice. Hers ensures balance. A dual offering to the forces that governed crop growth, weather, and survival. When viewed through this lens, the rhyme transforms into a coded agricultural ritual. The well, the water source, becomes the ultimate prize. But it's never reached. In many old myths, water was guarded or earned through suffering. Think of sacred springs, hidden wells, or forbidden lakes. Access required purity, courage, or blood. Jack's broken crown might be the price. In Welsh legend, tales of sacred wells abound, many with tragic stories. Maidens drowned, warriors bled, villages cursed for disrespecting the sanctity of water. These stories weren't just metaphors, they were warnings. Protect the source, pay the price. Fertility cults often use symbols like broken vessels, fallen figures, and inverted cycles to teach cosmic balance. Some rites involved miming injury or death, dramatizing the fall of a symbolic figure to ensure the community's rebirth. Could Jack's broken crown be one such symbolic death? Even the rhythm of the rhyme, its lilting rise and fall, mimics the very cycle it describes. Up the hill, down again. Life, then death. Action, then consequence. It's hypnotic, ritualistic, like a chant repeated for generations to remember something no one dared to write down. What's even more unsettling is how normalized the imagery became. Children singing about broken crowns and tumbling bodies, repeating a rhyme that, if decoded, may involve blood sacrifice, sacred water, and seasonal death rites. And we call it a lullaby. This isn't unique to Jack and Jill. Many nursery rhymes conceal similar shadows. Ring around the rosy, London Bridge is falling down, rock-a-bye baby, all echo loss, disaster, even death. They are cultural memory preserved in innocent melody. Over time, the rhyme became sanitized, polished into something safe for children. But echoes of its origins remain. The hill, the fall, the absence of water. These elements have survived because they mean something, even if we've forgotten what. And it raises the question, what else have we hidden inside rhymes? What stories have we turned into sing-song riddles just to forget their pain? The answer may lie not just in history, but in how these rhymes have been used and altered across cultures. In the next layer of Jack and Jill's mystery, we find not just ritual and death, but deliberate censorship and manipulation. Not all versions of Jack and Jill have survived the same way. As the rhymes spread across countries and centuries, certain lines were mysteriously dropped, others rewritten entirely. Why? Because nursery rhymes didn't just entertain, they carried messages, and messages are dangerous to those in power. Early printed versions of Jack and Jill often had multiple stanzas, far beyond the 4 lines we know today. Some included gruesome consequences, mocking laughter, whippings, and warnings about obedience. These additions shifted the tone from tragedy to punishment, reinforcing the idea that someone had done something wrong. One variant published in the early 19th century reads, "Then up Jack got, and home did trot, as fast as he could caper, to old Dame Dob who patched his knob, with vinegar and brown paper." This sounds innocent, even silly, but Dame Dob may represent discipline or authority, possibly even a nurse of punishment in a post-fall world. The phrase, patched his knob, meaning his head, may hint at a failed attempt to repair what's broken, but it also symbolically reflects the way society patches over trauma with something cheap and temporary. Vinegar and brown paper won't fix a cracked skull or a fallen crown. The next verse, often omitted today, is even darker. Then Jill came in and she did grin to see his paper plaster. Her mother whipped her across her knee for laughing at disaster. Here, the punishment shifts. Jill becomes the object of violence, not for causing harm, but for witnessing it with joy. Why was this removed from most modern versions? Likely because it was too real. It depicts familial abuse, the normalization of pain, and the suppression of female emotion. In a rhyme supposedly for children, such ideas were unacceptable in Victorian morality, so they were erased. But the erasures themselves are part of the story. What gets cut and why reveals who controlled the narrative. During the 18th and 19th centuries, as education systems expanded, publishers began to sanitize folklore, stripping out elements deemed inappropriate or rebellious. Rhymes with sexual, political, or violent undertones were either softened or shortened. What remained was a hollow echo, familiar rhythms with their meaning gutted. Jack and Jill became a rhyme for toddlers, even as its earliest forms were anything but innocent. And yet, even in its neutered form, the shadows linger. The imagery is still unsettling. A hill, a fall, a broken head, a trailing companion. It doesn't feel complete. That's because it wasn't meant to be. The rhyme once carried weight, social, ritualistic, symbolic, that has since been edited out. But not every culture accepted this censorship. In oral traditions across Ireland, Scotland, and parts of Eastern Europe, variants of the rhyme still exist with harsher tones and more graphic endings. Passed down by word of mouth, they preserved what the printing press tried to erase. Folklorists who study these versions note how often children's songs carry double meanings, harmless on the surface, but deeply rooted in lived experience. Famine, war, illness, execution. It's a way to process trauma when speaking plainly is too painful or dangerous. Jack and Jill, then, are not just characters. They are symbols of memory. Memory that authorities tried to bury under layers of rhyme and rhythm. But the bones of the story remain, scattered across versions, waiting to be reassembled. And when you do piece them back together, a pattern emerges. A tale not of clumsy children, but of ritual collapse, moral punishment, and generational sorrow. The kind of story that survives not in history books, but in whispers and lullabies. Which leads us to the final and most unnerving layer, one that ties this rhyme not just to ancient ritual or political allegory, but to death, folklore, and the symbolism of children's graves. In a quiet corner of Kilmersdon, Somerset, there lies a hill that locals have long claimed was the very one Jack and Jill climbed. The village's version of the tale dates back to the 1600s, but here, it's not just a rhyme, it's a ghost story. According to local folklore, Jack and Jill were teenage lovers, sneaking away to meet atop the hill. When Jill became pregnant, her father was furious. Jack was sent away. Upon his return, an argument broke out, and Jack was struck fatally on the head, his crown broken in a very literal sense. Jill, devastated and alone, later died during childbirth. Two tragic deaths linked by love, violence, and shame. And in the modern nursery rhyme, all that's left is the fall, cleaned of blood, stripped of names, left to echo as a caution with no context. What makes this even more unsettling is the presence of a real well at the top of that hill, now fenced off, but still visible. It's surrounded by gravestones. One small marker bears the name Jillian, dated centuries back. There is no Jack. Some say his grave was never marked. Could the rhyme be a folk haunting, A way to remember two forgotten souls, preserved in song so their stories wouldn't vanish? Children repeat the lines without knowing they may be reenacting grief, generation after generation. Across cultures, hills are often associated with the burial of the young, or children lost to unknown causes. In Celtic and Anglo-Saxon traditions, unbaptized infants were buried outside churchyards, sometimes under trees or on hillsides. These were places of quiet mourning and silence. Many nursery rhymes once served as euphemisms for death. When diseases swept through towns, plagues, measles, smallpox, communities used rhyme to teach, remember, or grieve. Jack and Jill may have echoed such a moment, commemorating children who fell ill and were never seen again. Even the structure of the rhyme suggests a moment frozen in time, a tragedy looped endlessly in verse. No recovery, no redemption, just the fall. That's how memory works after trauma, not in resolution, but in fragments repeated until they lose or regain their meaning. And that may be the most haunting truth of all. Jack and Jill is not meant to make sense. It's not a parable or a parlor trick. It's a scar carried forward through song, and we keep singing it because the pain never fully leaves. Some say the rhyme was just for fun, a simple story with a clumsy boy and a tumbling girl. Maybe that's how it started, or maybe that's the mask it wore to survive. The deeper you look, the more the rhyme begins to shift under your gaze. Not just a poem, but a layered artifact of ritual, repression, loss, and memory. Something we teach our children without knowing why. Something older than it pretends to be. So next time you hear Jack and Jill went up the hill, pause. Ask yourself, who really wrote it? What were they trying to remember or trying to forget? And above all, what else do we whisper to our children, thinking it's harmless, while the past listens silently beneath the soil? If this journey through hidden history spoke to you, consider subscribing to the Silent Lodge. Here, we give voice to the stories buried under dust and rhyme. Thank you for walking this path with us, and remember, the quietest tales often hide the loudest truths.